Matthew Henry Bible Commentary 2 Kings Book of 2 Kings chapter 12. This chapter gives us the history of the reign of Joash, which does not answer to that glorious beginning of it which we had an account of in the foregoing chapter. He was not so illustrious at 40 years old as he was at 7, yet his reign is to be reckoned one of the better sort, and appears much worse in Chronicles 2 Chron 24 than it does here. For there we find the blood of one of God's prophets laid at his door. Here we are only told that he did well while Jehoiada lived, verse 1-3. 2. That he was careful and active to repair the temple, verse 4-16. 3. That after a mean compact with Hazael, version 17-18, he died ingloriously, verse 19-21. The reign of Joash, king of Judah, 878 BC. One in the 7th year of Jehoash began to reign, and 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. 2. And Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. 3. But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places. The general account here given of Joash is 1. That he reigned 40 years. As he began his reign when he was very young, he might, in the course of nature, have continued much longer, for he was cut off when he was but 47 years old. V. 1. 2. That he did that which was right as long as Jehoiada lived to instruct him. V. 2. Many young men have come too soon to an estate, have had wealth and power and liberty before they knew how to use them, and it has been of bad consequence to them. But against this danger Joash was well guarded by having such a good director as Jehoiada was, so wise and experienced and faithful to him, and by having so much wisdom as to hearken to him and be directed by him, even when he was grown up. Note, it is a great mercy to young people, and especially to young princes, and all young men of consequence, to be under good direction, and to have those about them that will instruct them to do that which is right in the sight of the Lord. And they then do wisely and well for themselves when they are willing to be counseled and ruled by such. A child left to himself brings his mother to shame, but a child left to such a tuition may bring himself to honor and comfort. 3. That the high places were not taken away. V. 3. Up and down the country they had altars both for sacrifice and incense, to the honor of the God of Israel only, but in competition with, and at least in tacit contempt of, his altar at Jerusalem. These private altars, perhaps, had been more used in the late bad reigns than formerly, because it was not safe to go up to Jerusalem, nor was the temple service performed as it should have been, and, it may be, Jehoiada connived at them, because some well-meaning people were glad of them when they could not have better, and he hoped that the reforming of the temple and putting things into a good posture there would by degrees draw people from their high places, and they would dwindle of themselves, or perhaps neither the king nor the priest had zeal enough to carry on their reformation so far, nor courage and strength enough to encounter such an inveterate usage. The repairing of the temple, 853 BC. 4. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of every one that passeth the account, the money that every man is set at, and all the money that cometh into any man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord. 5. Let the priests take it to them, every man of his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house, wheresoever any breach shall be found. 6. But it was so, that in the 23rd year of King Jehoash the priests had not repaired the breaches of the house. 7. Then King Jehoash called for Jehoiada the priest, and the other priests, and said unto them, why repair ye not the breaches of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintance, but deliver it for the breaches of the house. 8. And the priests consented to receive no more money of the people, neither to repair the breaches of the house. 9. But Jehoiada the priest took a chest, and bored a hole in the lid of it, and set it beside the altar, on the right side, as one cometh into the house of the Lord. And the priests that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. 10. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags, and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. 11. And they gave the money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they laid it out to the carpenters and builders that wrought upon the house of the Lord, 12, and to masons, and hewers of stone, and to buy timber and hewed stone to repair the breaches of the house of the Lord, and for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. 13. Howbeit there were not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, any vessels of gold, or vessels of silver, of the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. 14. But they gave that to the workmen, and repaired therewith the house of the Lord. 15. Moreover, they reckoned not with the men, into whose hand they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully. 16. The trespass money and sin money was not brought into the house of the Lord, it was the priests. We have here an account of the repairing of the temple in the reign of Joash. Aye, it seems the temple had gone out of repair. Though Solomon built it very strong, of the best materials and in the best manner, yet in time it went to decay, and there were breaches found in it. 5. In the roofs, or walls, or floors, the ceiling, or wainscoting, or windows, or the partitions of the courts. Even temples themselves are the worse for the wearing, but the heavenly temple will never wax old. Yet it was not only the teeth of time that made these breaches. The sons of Athaliah had broken up the house of God, 2 Chron 24:7, and, out of enmity to the service of the temple, had damaged the buildings of it. And the priests had not taken care to repair the breaches in time, so that they went worse and worse. Unworthy were those husbandmen to have this valuable vineyard let out to them upon such easy terms who could not afford to keep the winepress in due and tenantable repair, Matt 21:33. Justly did their great lord sue them for this permissive waste, and by his judgments recover locum vastatum, for dilapidations, as the law speaks, when this neglected temple was laid even with the ground. 2. The king himself was, as it should seem, the first and forwardest man that took care for the repair of it. We do not find that the priests complained of it or that Jehoiada himself was active in it, but the king was zealous in the matter. 1. Because he was king, and God expects and requires from those who have power that they use it for the maintenance and support of religion, the redress of grievances and reparation of decays, for the exciting and engaging of ministers to do their part and people theirs. 2. Because the temple had been both his nursery and his sanctuary when he was a child, in a grateful remembrance of which he now appeared zealous for the honor of it. Those who have experienced the comfort and benefit of religious assemblies will make the reproach of them their burden, Zeph 3:18, the support of them their care, and the prosperity of them their chief joy. 3. The priests were ordered to collect money for these repairs, and to take care that the work was done. The king had the affairs of his kingdom to mind, and could not himself inspect this affair, but he employed the priests to manage it, the fittest persons, and most likely, one would think, to be hardy in it. 1. He gave them orders for the levying of the money of the dedicated things. They must not stay till it was paid in, but they must call for it where they knew it was due, in their respective districts, as redemption money, by virtue of the law, Lev 27:2, 3, or as a freewill offering, v. 4. This they were to gather every man of his acquaintance, and it was supposed that there was no man but had acquaintance with some or other of the priests. Note, we should take the opportunity that God gives us of exciting those we have a particular acquaintance with to that which is good. 2. He gave them orders for laying out the money they had levied in repairing the breaches of the house, v. 5. 4. This method did not answer the intention, v. 6. Little money was raised. Either the priests were careless and did not call on the people to pay in their dues, or the people had so little confidence in the priests' management that they were backward to pay money into their hands. If they were distrusted without cause, it was the people's shame. If with it was more theirs. But what money was raised was not applied to the proper use. The breaches of the house were not repaired. The priests thought it might serve as well as it had done, and therefore put off repairing from time to time. Church work is usually slow work, but it is a pity that churchmen, of all men, should be slow at it. Perhaps what little money they raised they thought it necessary to use for the maintenance of the priests, which must needs fall much short when 10 tribes had wholly revolted, and the other 2 were wretchedly corrupted. Another method was therefore taken. The king had his heart much set upon having the breaches of the house repaired. 7. His apostasy, at last, gives us cause to question whether he had as good an affection for the service of the temple as he had for the structure. Many have been zealous for building and beautifying churches and for other forms of godliness, who yet have been strangers to the power of it. However, we commend his zeal and blame him not for reproving even his tutor Jehoiada himself when he saw him remiss, and so convincing was his reproof that the priests owned themselves unworthy to be any longer employed, and consented to the taking of some other measures and the giving up of the money they had received into other hands. 8. It was honestly done when they found they had not spirit to do it themselves, not to hinder other people from doing it. Another course was taken, 1. For raising money. 9, 10. The money was not paid into private hands, but put into a public chest, and then people brought it in readily and in great abundance, not only their dues, but their freewill offerings for so good a work. The high priest and the secretary of state counted the money out of the chest and laid it by in specie for the use to which it was appropriated. When public distributions are made faithfully, public contributions will be made cheerfully. The money that was given, 1. was dropped into the chest through a hole in the lid, past recall, to intimate that what has been once resigned to God must never be resumed. Every man, as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give. 2. The chest was put on the right hand as they went in, which, some think, is alluded to in that rule of charity which our Savior gives, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. But while they were getting all they could for the repair of the temple, they did not break in upon that which was the stated maintenance of the priests. 16. The trespass money and the sin money, which were given to them by that law, Lev 5:15-16, were reserved to them. Let not the servants of the temple be starved under color of repairing the breaches of it. 2. For laying out the money that was raised. 1. They did not put it into the hands of the priests, who were not versed in affairs of this nature, having other work to mind, but into the hands of those that did the work, or at least had the oversight of it. 11. Those were fittest to be entrusted with this business, whose employment lay that way. Tractant Fabrilia Fabri. Every artist has his trade assigned, but let not those who are called to war the holy warfare entangle themselves in the affairs of this life. Those that were thus entrusted did the business. 1. Carefully, purchasing materials and paying workmen. 12. Business is done with expedition when those are employed in it that understand it and know which way to go about it. 2. Faithfully. Such a reputation they got for honesty that there was no occasion to examine their bills or audit their accounts. Let all that are entrusted with public money or public work learn hence to deal faithfully, as those that know God will reckon with them, whether men do or no. Those that think it is no sin to cheat the government, cheat the country, or cheat the church, will be of another mind when God shall set their sins in order before them. 2. They did not lay it out in ornaments for the temple, in vessels of gold or silver, but in necessary repairs first. 13. Whence we may learn, in all our expenses to give that the preference which is most needful, and, in dealing for the public, to deal as we would for ourselves. After the repairs were finished, we find the overplus turned into plate for the service of the temple. 2 Chron 24:14. Death of Joash, king of Judah, 840 BC. 17 Then Hazael king of Syria went up and fought against Gath and took it, and Hazael set his face to go up to Jerusalem. 18 And Jehoash king of Judah took all the hallowed things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, his fathers, kings of Judah, had dedicated, and his own hallowed things, and all the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord, and in the king's house, and sent it to Hazael king of Syria, and he went away from Jerusalem. 19 And the rest of the acts of Joash, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? 20 And his servants arose, and made a conspiracy, and slew Joash in the house of Millo, which goeth down to Silo. 21 For Jozachar the son of Shimeth, And Jehozabad the son of Shomer, his servants, smote him, and he died, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah his son reigned in his stead. When Joash had revolted from God and become both an idolater and a persecutor, the hand of the Lord went out against him, and his last state was worse than his first. His wealth and honor became an easy prey to his neighbors. Hazael, when he had chastised Israel, ch. 1032, threatened Judah, and Jerusalem likewise, took Gath, a strong city, v. 17, and thence intended to march with his forces against Jerusalem, the royal city, the holy city, but whose defense, on account of its sinfulness, had departed. Joash had neither spirit nor strength to make head against him, but gave him all the hallowed things, and all the gold that was found both in his exchequer and in the treasures of the temple, v. 18, to bribe him to march another way. If it were lawful to do this for the public safety, better part with the gold of the temple than expose the temple itself. Yet 1. If he had not forsaken God and forfeited his protection, his affairs would not have been brought to this extremity, but he might have forced Hazael to retire. 2. He diminished himself and made himself very mean, lost the honor of a prince and a soldier, and of an Israelite too, in alienating the dedicated things. 3. He impoverished himself and his kingdom. And 4. He tempted Hazael to come again, when he could carry home so rich a booty without striking a stroke. And it had this effect, for the next year the host of Syria came up against Jerusalem, destroyed the prince, and plundered the city. 2 Chron 24:23, 24. 2. His life became an easy prey to his own servants. They conspired against him and slew him, v. 20:21, not aiming at his kingdom, for they opposed not his sons succeeding him, but to be avenged on him for some crime he had committed. And we are told in Chronicles that his murdering the prophet, Jehoiada's son, was the provocation. In this, how unrighteous soever they were, vengeance was not theirs, nor did it belong to them to repay. God was righteous, and this was not the only time that he let even kings know that it was at their peril if they touched his anointed and did his prophets any harm, and that, when he comes to make inquisition for blood, the blood of prophets will run the account very high. Thus fell Joash, who began in the spirit and ended in the flesh. God usually sets marks of his displeasure upon apostates, even in this life, for they of all sinners do most reproach the Lord. Chapter 13, this chapter brings us again to the history of the kings of Israel, and particularly of the family of Jehu. We have here an account of the reign, of his son Jehoahaz, which continued 17 years. 1. His bad character in general, version 1. 2. The trouble he was brought into, version 3, and the low ebb of his affairs, version 7. 2. His humiliation before God, and God's compassion towards him, version 4, 5, and 23. 3. His continuance in his idolatry notwithstanding, version 6. 4. His death, version 8, 9. 2. Of his grandson Joash, which continued 16 years. Here is a general account of his reign in the usual form, ver 10 to 13, but a particular account of the death of Elisha in his time. 1. The kind visit the king made him, version 14, the encouragement he gave the king in his wars with Syria, ver 15 to 19. 2. His death and burial, version 20, and a miracle wrought by his bones, version 21. And, lastly, the advantages Joash gained against the Syrians, according to his predictions, version 24, 25. The reign of Jehoahaz, 839 BC. 1 in the 23rd year of Joash the son of Ahaziah king of Judah, Jehoahaz the son of Jehu began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 17 years. 2. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. 3. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael king of Syria, and into the hand of Benhadad the son of Hazael, all their days. 4. And Jehoahaz besought the Lord, and the Lord hearkened unto him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, because the king of Syria oppressed them. 5. And the Lord gave Israel a savior, so that they went out from under the hand of the Syrians, and the children of Israel dwelt in their tents, as beforetime. 6. Nevertheless, they departed not from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, who made Israel sin, but walked therein, and there remained the grove also in Samaria. 7. Neither did he leave of the people to Jehoahaz but 50 horsemen, and 10 chariots, and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Syria had destroyed them, and had made them like the dust by threshing. 8. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz, and all that he did, and his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? 9. And Jehoahaz slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Joash his son reigned in his stead. This general account of the reign of Jehoahaz and of the state of Israel during his 17 years, though short, is long enough to let us see two things which are very affecting and instructive. The glory of Israel raked up in the ashes, buried and lost and turned into shame. How unlike does Israel appear here to what it had been and might have been? How is its crown profaned and its honor laid in the dust? 1. It was the honor of Israel that they worshipped the only living and true God, who is a spirit, an eternal mind, and had rules by which to worship him of his own appointment, but by changing the glory of their incorruptible God into the similitude of an ox, the truth of God into a lie, they lost this honor and leveled themselves with the nations that worshipped the work of their own hands. We find here that the king followed the sins of Jeroboam, v. 2, and the people departed not from them, but walked therein, v. 6. There could not be a greater reproach than these two idolized calves were to a people that were instructed in the service of God and entrusted with the lively oracles. In all the history of the 10 tribes, we never find the least shock given to that idolatry, but in every reign, still the calf was their god, and they separated themselves to that shame. 2. It was the honor of Israel that they were taken under the special protection of heaven. God himself was their defense, the shield of their help, and the sword of their excellency. Happy wast thou, O Israel, upon this account. But here, as often before, we find them stripped of this glory and exposed to the insults of all their neighbors. They by their sins provoked God to anger, and then he delivered them into the hands of Hazael and Ben-Hadad, v. 3. Hazael oppressed Israel, v. 22. Surely never was any nation so often plucked and pillaged by their neighbors as Israel was. This the people brought upon themselves by sin, when they had provoked God to pluck up their hedge. The goodness of their land did but tempt their neighbors to prey upon them. So low was Israel brought in this reign, by the many depredations which the Syrians made upon them, that the militia of the kingdom and all the force they could bring into the field were but 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 footmen. A despicable muster, v. 7. Have the thousands of Israel come to this? How has the gold become dim? The debauching of a nation will certainly be the debasing of it. 2. Some sparks of Israel's ancient honor appearing in these ashes. It is not quite forgotten, notwithstanding all these quarrels, that this people is the Israel of God, and he is the God of Israel. For 1. It was the ancient honor of Israel that they were a praying people, and here we find somewhat of that honor revived. For Jehoahaz their king, in his distress, besought the Lord, v. 4, applied for help, not to the calves. What help could they give him, but to the Lord? It becomes kings to be beggars at God's door, and the greatest of men to be humble petitioners at the footstool of his throne. Need will drive them to it. 2. It was the ancient honor of Israel that they had God nigh unto them in all that which they called upon him for, Dut 4:7, and so he was here. Though he might justly have rejected the prayer as an abomination to him, yet the Lord hearkened unto Jehoahaz, and to his prayer for himself and for his people, v. 4, and he gave Israel a savior, v. 5, not Jehoahaz himself. For all his days Hazael oppressed Israel, v. 22, but his son, to whom, in answer to his father's prayers, God gave success against the Syrians, so that he recovered the cities which they had taken from his father, v. 25. This gracious answer God gave to the prayer of Jehoahaz, not for his sake, or the sake of that unworthy people, but in remembrance of his covenant with Abraham, v. 23. Which, in such exigencies as these, he had long since promised to have respect to. Lev 26:42. See how swift God is to show mercy, how ready to hear prayers, how willing to find out a reason to be gracious, else he would not look so far back as that ancient covenant which Israel had so often broken and forfeited all the benefit of. Let this invite and engage us forever to him, and encourage even those that have forsaken him to return and repent, for there is forgiveness with him, that he may be feared. The reign of Joash, king of Israel, 839 BC. 10 in the 37th year of Joash king of Judah began Jehoash the son of Jehoahaz to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 16 years. 11 And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel sin, but he walked therein. 12 And the rest of the acts of Joash, and all that he did, and his might wherewith he fought against Amaziah king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? 13 And Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat upon his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. 14 Now Elisha was fallen sick of his sickness, whereof he died. And Joash the king of Israel came down unto him, and wept over his face, and said, O my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. 15 And Elisha said unto him, Take bow and arrows. And he took unto him bow and arrows. 16 And he said to the king of Israel, Put thine hand upon the bow. And he put his hand upon it, and Elisha put his hands upon the king's hands. 17 And he said, Open the window eastward. And he opened it. Then Elisha said, Shoot. And he shot. And he said, The arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. For thou shalt smite the Syrians in Aphek, till thou have consumed them. 18 And he said, Take the arrows. And he took them. And he said unto the king of Israel, Smite upon the ground. And he smote thrice and stayed. 19 And the man of God was wroth with him, and said, Thou shouldest have smitten 5 or 6 times. Then hadst thou smitten Syria till thou hadst consumed it, whereas now thou shalt smite Syria but thrice. We have here Jehoash or Joash, the son of Jehoahaz and grandson of Jehu, upon the throne of Israel. Probably the house of Jehu intended some respect to the house of David when they gave this heir apparent to the crown the same name with him that was then king of Judah. The general account here given of him and his reign is much the same with what we have already met with, and has little in it remarkable, v. 10 to 13. He was none of the worst, and yet, because he kept up that ancient and politic idolatry of the house of Jeroboam, it is said, he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. That one evil was enough to leave an indelible mark of infamy upon his name. For, how little evil soever men saw in it, it was, in the sight of the Lord, a very wicked thing, and we are sure that his judgment is according to truth. It is observable how lightly the inspired penman passes over his acts, and his might wherewith he warred, leaving it to the common historians to record them, while he takes notice only of the respect he showed to Elisha. One good action shall make a better figure in God's book than 20 great ones, and, in his account, it gains a man a much better reputation to honor a prophet than to conquer a king and his army. 2. The particular account of what passed between him and Elisha has several things in it remarkable. 1. Elisha fell sick, v. 14. Observe 1. He lived long, for it was now about 60 years since he was first called to be a prophet. It was a great mercy to Israel, and especially to the sons of the prophets, that he was continued so long a burning and shining light. Elijah finished his testimony in a 4th part of that time. God's prophets have their day set them, some longer, others shorter, as infinite wisdom sees fit. 2. All the latter part of his time, from the anointing of Jehu, which was 45 years before Joash began his reign, we find no mention made of him, or of anything he did, till we find him here upon his deathbed. He might be useful to the last, and yet not so famous as he had sometimes been. The time of his flourishing was less than the time of his living. Let not old people complain of obscurity, but rather be well pleased with retirement. 3. The spirit of Elijah rested on Elisha, and yet he was not sent for to heaven in a fiery chariot, as Elijah was, but went the common road out of the world, and was visited with the visitation of all men. If God honors some above others, who yet are not inferior to them in gifts or graces, who shall find fault? May he not do what he will with his own? 2. King Joash visited him in his sickness, and wept over him. v. 14. This was an evidence of some good in him, that he had a value and affection for a faithful prophet. So far was he from hating and persecuting him as a troubler of Israel that he loved and honored him as one of the greatest blessings of his kingdom, and lamented the loss of him. There have been those who would not be obedient to the word of God, and yet have the faithful ministers of it so manifested in their consciences that they could not but have an honor for them. Observe here, 1. When the king heard of Elisha's sickness, he came to visit him, and to receive his dying counsel and blessing, and it was no disparagement to him, though a king, thus to honor one whom God honored. Note, it may turn much to our spiritual advantage to attend the sickbeds and deathbeds of good ministers and other good men, that we may learn to die, and may be encouraged in religion by the living comforts they have from it in a dying hour. 2. Though Elisha was very old, had been a great while useful, and, in the course of nature, could not continue long, yet the king, when he saw him sick and likely to die, wept over him. The aged are most experienced and therefore can worst be spared. In many causes, one old witness is worth 10 young ones. 3. He lamented him in the same words with which Elisha had himself lamented the removal of Elijah, my father, my father." It is probable he had heard or read them in that famous story. Note, those that give just honors to the generation that goes before them are often recompensed with the like from the generation that comes after them. He that watereth with tears, shall be watered, shall be so watered, also himself, when it comes to his own turn. Prov 11:25. 4. This king was herein selfish. He lamented the loss of Elisha because he was as the chariot and horsemen of Israel, and therefore could be ill spared when Israel was so poor in chariots and horsemen, as we find they were. v. 7. When they had in all but 50 horsemen and 10 chariots. Those who consider how much good men contribute to the defense of a nation, and the keeping off of God's judgments, will see cause to lament the removal of them. 3. Elisha gave the king great assurances of his success against the Syrians, Israel's present oppressors, and encouraged him to prosecute the war against them with vigor. Elisha was aware that therefore he was loath to part with him because he looked upon him as the great bulwark of the kingdom against that common enemy, and depended much upon his blessings and prayers in his designs against them. "Well," says Elisha, "if that be the cause of your grief, let not that trouble thee, for thou shalt be victorious over the Syrians when I am in my grave. I die, but God will surely visit you. He has the residue of the Spirit and can raise up other prophets to pray for you. God's grace is not tied to one hand. He can bury his workmen and yet carry on his work. To animate the king against the Syrians, he gives him a sign, orders him to take bow and arrows, v. 15, to intimate to him that, in order to the deliverance of his kingdom from the Syrians, he must put himself into a military posture and resolve to undergo the perils and fatigues of war. God would be the agent, but he must be the instrument. And that he should be successful, he gives him a token by directing him, 1. To shoot an arrow towards Syria, v. 16, 17. The king, no doubt, knew how to manage a bow better than the prophet did, and yet, because the arrow now to be shot was to have its significancy from the divine institution, as if he were now to be disciplined, he received the words of command from the prophet. "Put thy hand upon the bow, open the window, shoot." Nay, as if he had been a child that never drew a bow before, Elisha put his hands upon the king's hands, to signify that in all his expeditions against the Syrians he must look up to God for direction and strength, must reckon his own hands not sufficient for him, but go on in a dependence upon divine aid. "He teacheth my hands to war," PS 1834, 144:1. The trembling hands of a dying prophet, as they signified the concurrence and communication of the power of God, gave this arrow more force than the hands of the king in his full strength. The Syrians had made themselves masters of the country that lay eastward, ch. 1033. Thitherward therefore the arrow was directed, and such an interpretation given by the prophet of the shooting of this arrow, though shot in one respect at random, as made it 1. A commission to the king to attack the Syrians, notwithstanding their power and possession. 2. A promise of success therein. It is the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, even the arrow of deliverance from Syria. It is God that commands deliverance, and when he will effect it, who can hinder? The arrow of deliverance is his. He shoots out his arrows, and the work is done. PS 18:14. Thou shalt smite the Syrians in Aphek, where they are now encamped, or where they are to have a general rendezvous of their forces, till thou have consumed those of them that are vexatious and oppressive to thee and thy kingdom. 2. To strike with the arrows. V. 18:19. The prophet, having in God's name assured him of victory over the Syrians, he will now try him and see what improvement he will make of his victories, whether he will push them on with more zeal than Ahab did when Ben-Hadad lay at his mercy. For the trial of this he bids him smite with the arrows on the ground. Believe them brought to the ground by the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and laid at thy feet. And now show me what thou wilt do to them when thou hast them down. Whether thou wilt do as David did when God gave him the necks of his enemies, beat them small as the dust before the wind. PS 18:40-42. The king showed not that eagerness and flame which one might have expected upon this occasion, but smote thrice and no more. Either out of foolish tenderness to the Syrians, he smote as if he were afraid of hurting them, at least of ruining them, willing to show mercy to those that never did, nor ever would, show mercy to him or his people. Or, perhaps, he smote thrice and very coldly, because he thought it but a silly thing, that it looked idle and childish for a king to beat the floor with his arrows, and thrice was often enough for him to play the fool merely to please the prophet. But by contemning the sign, he lost the thing signified, sorely to the grief of the dying prophet, who was angry with him, and told him he should have smitten 5 or 6 times. Not being straitened in the power and promise of God, why should he be straitened in his own expectations and endeavors? Note, it cannot but be a trouble to good men to see those they wish well to stand in their own light and forsake their own mercies, to see them lose their advantages against their spiritual enemies, and to give them advantage. The death of Elisha, 837 BC. 20 and Elisha died, and they buried him. And the bands of the Moabites invaded the land at the coming in of the year. 21 And it came to pass, as they were burying a man, that, behold, they spied a band of men, and they cast the man into the sepulchre of Elisha. And when the man was let down, and touched the bones of Elisha, he revived, and stood up on his feet. 22 But Hazael king of Syria oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. 23 And the Lord was gracious unto them, and had compassion on them, and had respect unto them, because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them, neither cast he them from his presence as yet. 24 So Hazael king of Syria died, and Ben-Hadad his son reigned in his stead. 25 And Jehoash the son of Jehoahaz took again out of the hand of Ben-Hadad the son of Hazael the cities, which he had taken out of the hand of Jehoahaz his father by war. 3 times did Joash beat him, and recovered the cities of Israel. We must here attend, the sepulchre of Elisha. He died in a good old age, and they buried him, and what follows shows. 1. What power there was in his life to keep off judgments, for, as soon as he was dead, the bands of the Moabites invaded the land, not great armies to face them in the field, but roving skulking bands, that murdered and plundered by surprise. God has many ways to chastise a provoking people. The king was apprehensive of danger only from the Syrians, but, behold, the Moabites invade him. Trouble comes sometimes from that point whence we least feared it. The mentioning of this immediately upon the death of Elisha intimates that the removal of God's faithful prophets is a presage of judgments coming. When ambassadors are recalled, heralds may be expected. 2. What power there was in his dead body. It communicated life to another dead body. V. 21. This great miracle, though very briefly related, was a decided proof of his mission and a confirmation of all his prophecies. It was also a plain indication of another life after this. When Elisha died, there was not an end of him, for then he could not have done this. From operation, we may infer existence. By this it appeared that the Lord was still the God of Elisha, therefore Elisha still lived, for God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And it may, perhaps, have a reference to Christ, by whose death and burial the grave is made to all believers a safe and happy passage to life. It likewise intimated that though Elisha was dead, yet, in virtue of the promises made by him, Israel's interests, though they seemed quite sunk and lost, should revive and flourish again. The neighbors were carrying the dead body of a man to the grave, and, fearing to fall into the hands of the Moabites, a party of whom they saw at a distance near the place where the body was to be interred, they laid the corpse in the next convenient place, which proved to be Elisha's sepulchre. The dead man, upon touching Elisha's bones, revived, and, it is likely, went home again with his friends. Josephus relates the story otherwise, that some thieves, having robbed and murdered an honest traveler, threw his dead body into Elisha's grave, and it immediately revived. Elijah was honored in his departure. Elisha was honored after his departure. God thus dispenses honors as he pleases, but one way or other, the rest of all the saints will be glorious. Isa 11:10. It is good being near the saints and having our lot with them both in life and death. 2. The sword of Joash king of Israel, and we find it successful against the Syrians. 1. The cause of his success was God's favor. v. 23. The Lord was gracious to them, had compassion on them in their miseries, and respect unto them. The several expressions here of the same import call upon us to observe and admire the triumphs of divine goodness in the deliverance of such a provoking people. It was of the Lord's mercies that they were not consumed, because he would not destroy them as yet. He foresaw they would destroy themselves at last, but as yet he would reprieve them and give them space to repent. The slowness of God's processes against sinners must be construed to the honor of his mercy, not the impeachment of his justice. 2. The effect of his success was Israel's benefit. He recovered out of the hands of Ben-Hadad the cities of Israel, which the Syrians were possessed of. v. 25. This was a great kindness to the cities themselves, which were hereby brought from under the yoke of oppression, and to the whole kingdom, which was much strengthened by the reduction of those cities. Thrice Joash beat the Syrians, just as often as he had struck the ground with the arrows, and then a full stop was put to the course of his victories. Many have repented, when it was too late, of their distrusts and the straightness of their desires. Chapter 14, this chapter, continues the history of the succession in the kingdoms both of Judah and Israel. In the kingdom of Judah here is 1. The entire history, as much as is recorded in this book, of Amaziah's reign. 1. His good character, verse 1-4. 2. The justice he executed on the murderers of his father, version 5, 6. 3. His victory over the Edomites, version 7. 4. His war with Joash and his defeat in that war, verse 8-14. 5. His fall at last by conspiracy against him, verse 17-20. 2. The beginning of the history of Azariah, version 21, 22. 2. In the kingdom of Israel, the conclusion of the reign of Joash, version 15, 16, and the entire history of Jeroboam his son, the second of that name, verse 23-29. How many great men are made to stand in a little compass in God's book? The reign of Amaziah, 828 BC. 1. In the second year of Joash son of Jehoahaz king of Israel reigned Amaziah the son of Joash king of Judah. 2. He was 20 and 5 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 20 and 9 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehodan of Jerusalem. 3. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did according to all things as Joash his father did. For howbeit the high places were not taken away, as yet the people did sacrifice and burnt incense on the high places. 5. And it came to pass, as soon as the kingdom was confirmed in his hand, that he slew his servants which had slain the king his father. 6. But the children of the murderers he slew not, according unto that which is written in the book of the law of Moses, wherein the Lord commanded, saying, The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, nor the children be put to death for the fathers, but every man shall be put to death for his own sin. 7. He slew of Edom in the valley of Salt 10,000, and took Selah by war, and called the name of it Joktheel unto this day. Amaziah, the son and successor of Joash, is the king whom here we have an account of. Let us take a view of him, in the temple, and there he acted, in some measure, well, like Joash, but not like David. v. 3. He began well, but did not persevere. He did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, kept up his attendance on God's altars and his attention to God's word, yet not like David. It is not enough to do that which our pious predecessors did, merely to keep up the usage, but we must do it as they did it, from the same principle of faith and devotion and with the same sincerity and resolution. It is here taken notice of, as before, that the high places were not taken away. v. 4. It is hard to get clear of those corruptions which, by long usage, have gained both prescription and a favorable opinion. 2. On the bench, and there we have him doing justice on the traitors that murdered his father, not as soon as ever he came to the crown, lest it should occasion some disturbance, but he prudently deferred it till the kingdom was confirmed in his hand. v. 5. To weaken a factious party gradually, when it is not safe to provoke, often proves the way to ruin it effectually. Justice strikes surely by striking slowly, and is often executed most prudently when it is not executed presently. Wisdom here is profitable to direct. Amaziah did thus. 1. According to the rule of the law, that ancient rule, that he that sheds man's blood by man shall his blood be shed. Never let traitors or murderers expect to come to their graves like other men. Let them flee to the pit, and let no man stay them. 2. Under the limitation of the law, the children of the murderers he slew not, because the law of Moses had expressly provided that the children should not be put to death for the fathers. v. 6. It is probable that this is taken notice of because there were those about him that advised him to that rigor, both in revenge, because the crime was extraordinary, the murder of a king, and in policy, that the children might not plot against him, in revenge of their father's death. But against these insinuations he opposed the express law of God, Dut 24:16, which he was to judge by, and which he resolved to adhere to and trust God with the issue. God visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, because every man is guilty before him and owes him a death, so that, if he require the life for the father's sin, he does not wrong, the sinner having forfeited it already by his own. But he does not allow earthly princes to do thus. The children, before them, are innocent, and therefore must not suffer as guilty. 3. In the field, and there we find him triumphing over the Edomites. v. 7. Edom had revolted from under the hand of Judah in Joram's time. Ch. 8:22. Now he makes war upon them to bring them back to their allegiance, kills 10,000, and takes the chief city of Arabia the Stony, called Selah, a rock, and gave it a new name. We shall find a larger account of this expedition, 2 Chron 25:5, etc. 8. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, Come, let us look one another in the face. 9. And Jehoash the king of Israel sent to Amaziah king of Judah, saying, The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, Give thy daughter to my son to wife. And there passed by a wild beast that was in Lebanon, and trode down the thistle. 10. Thou hast indeed smitten Edom, and thine heart hath lifted thee up. Glory of this, and tarry at home. For why shouldest thou meddle to thy hurt, that thou shouldest fall, even thou and Judah with thee? 11. But Amaziah would not hear. Therefore Jehoash king of Israel went up, and he and Amaziah king of Judah looked one another in the face at Bethshemesh, which belongeth to Judah. 12. And Judah was put to the worse before Israel, and they fled every man to their tents. 13. And Jehoash king of Israel took Amaziah king of Judah, the son of Jehoash the son of Ahaziah, at Bethshemesh, and came to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim unto the corner gate, 400 cubits. 14. And he took all the gold and silver, and all the vessels that were found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasures of the king's house, and hostages, and returned to Samaria. for several successions after the division of the kingdoms that of Judah suffered much by the enmity of Israel. After Asa's time, for several successions, it suffered more by the friendship of Israel and by the alliance and affinity made with them. But now we meet with hostility between them again, which had not been for some ages before. I, Amaziah, upon no provocation and without showing any cause of quarrel, challenged Joash into the field. V8 Come, let us look one another in the face. Let us try our strength in battle. Had he challenged him to a personal duel only, the error would have remained with himself. But each must bring all their forces into the field, and thousands of lives on both sides must be sacrificed to his capricious humor. Hereby he showed himself proud, presumptuous, and prodigal of blood. Some think that he intended to avenge the injury which the dismissed, disgusted Israelites had lately done to his country in their return, 2 Chron 25:13, and that he had also the vanity to think of subduing the kingdom of Israel and reuniting it to Judah. A fool's lips thus enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. Those that challenge are chargeable with that beginning of strife, which is as the letting forth of water. He that is eager either to fight or to go to law may perhaps have enough of it quickly, and be the first that repents it. 2. Joash sent him a grave rebuke for his challenge, with advice to withdraw it. V9:10. 1. He mortifies his pride by comparing himself to a cedar, a stately tree, and Amaziah to a thistle, a sorry weed, telling him he was so far from fearing him that he despised him and scorned as much to have anything to do with him, or make any alliance with him, as the cedar would to match his daughter to a thistle. The ancient house of David he thinks not worthy to be named the same day with the house of Jehu, though an upstart. How may a humble man smile to hear two proud and scornful men set their wits on work to vilify and undervalue one another? 2. He foretells his fall. A wild beast trode down the thistle, and so put an end to his treaty with the cedar. So easily does Joash think his forces can crush Amaziah, and so unable does he think him to make any resistance. 3. He shows him the folly of his challenge. Thou hast indeed smitten Edom, a weak, unarmed, undisciplined body of men, and therefore thinkest thou canst carry all before thee and subdue the regular forces of Israel with as much ease. Thy heart has lifted thee up. See where the root of all sin lies. It is in the heart, thence it flows, and that must bear the blame. It is not providence, the event, the occasion, whatever it is, that makes men proud, or secure, or discontented, or the like, but it is their own heart that does it. Thou art proud of the blow thou hast given to Edom, as if that had made thee formidable to all mankind. Those wretchedly deceive themselves that magnify their own performances, and, because they have been blessed with some little success and reputation, conclude themselves fit for anything and no less sure of it. 4. He counsels him to be content with the honor he has won, and not to hazard that, by grasping at more that was out of his reach. Why shouldst thou meddle to thy hurt, as fools often do? That will be meddling. Prov 23. Many would have had wealth and honor enough if they had but known when they had enough. He warns him of the consequence, that it would be fatal not to himself only, but to his kingdom, which he ought to protect. 3. Amaziah persisted in his resolution, and the issue was bad. He had better have tarried at home, for Joash gave him such a look in the face as put him to confusion. Challengers commonly prove to be on the losing side. 1. His army was routed and dispersed, v12. Josephus says, when they were to engage, they were struck with such terror that they did not strike a stroke, but everyone made the best of his way. 2. He himself was taken prisoner by the king of Israel, and then had enough of looking him in the face. Amaziah's pedigree comes in here somewhat abruptly, the son of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, because perhaps he had gloried in the dignity of his ancestors, or because he now smarted for their iniquity. 3. The conqueror entered Jerusalem, which tamely opened to him, and yet he broke down their wall, and, as Josephus says, drove his chariot in triumph through the breach, in reproach to them, and that he might, when he pleased, take possession of the royal city. 4. He plundered Jerusalem, took away all that was valuable, and returned to Samaria, laden with spoils, v. 14. It was said of Joash that he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and of Amaziah that he did that which was right. And yet Joash triumphs thus over Amaziah, and why so? Because God would show, in Amaziah's fate, that he resists the proud, or because, whatever they were otherwise, Joash had lately been respectful to one of God's prophets, ch. 13:14, but Amaziah had been abusive to another. 2 Chron 25:16, and God will honor those who honor him in his prophets, but those who despise them, and him in them, shall be lightly esteemed. Reign of Jeroboam, king of Israel, 825 BC. 15 Now the rest of the acts of Jehoash which he did, and his might, and how he fought with Amaziah king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? 16 And Jehoash slept with his fathers, and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son reigned in his stead. 17 And Amaziah the son of Joash king of Judah lived after the death of Jehoash son of Jehoahaz king of Israel 15 years. 18 And the rest of the acts of Amaziah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? 19 Now they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and slew him there. 20 And they brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. 21 And all the people of Judah took Azariah, which was 16 years old, and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. 22 He built Elath, and restored it to Judah, after that the king slept with his fathers. Here are 3 kings brought to their graves in these few verses. 1. Joash king of Israel, v. 15:16. We attended his funeral once before, ch. 13:12-13. But because the historian had occasion to give a further account of his life and actions, he again mentions his death and burial. 2. Amaziah king of Judah. 15 years he survived his conqueror the king of Israel, v. 17. A man may live a great while after he has been shamed, may be thoroughly mortified, as Amaziah no doubt was, and yet not dead. His acts are said to be found written in his annals, v. 18, but not his might, for his cruelty when he was a conqueror over the Edomites, and his insolence when he challenged the king of Israel, showed him void of true courage. He was slain by his own subjects, who hated him for his maladministration, v. 19, and made Jerusalem too hot for him, the ignominious breach made in their walls being occasioned by his folly and presumption. He fled to Lachish. How long he continued concealed or sheltered there we are not told, but at last he was there murdered, v. 19. No further did the rage of the rebels extend, for they brought him in a chariot to Jerusalem and buried him there among his ancestors. 3. Azariah succeeded Amaziah, but not till 12 years after his father's death, for Amaziah died in the 15th year of Jeroboam, as appears by comparing v. 23 with v. 2. But Azariah did not begin his reign till the 27th of Jeroboam, ch. 15:1, for he was but 4 years old at the death of his father, so that, for 12 years, till he came to be 16, the government was in the hands of protectors. He reigned very long, ch. 15:2, and yet the account of his reign is here industriously huddled up and broken off abruptly. v. 22 He built Elath, which had belonged to the Edomites, but, it is probable, was recovered by his father. v. 7 After that the king slept with his fathers, as if that had been all he did that was worth mentioning, or rather it is meant of King Amaziah. He built it soon after Amaziah died. 23 In the 15th year of Amaziah the son of Joash king of Judah, Jeroboam the son of Joash king of Israel began to reign in Samaria, and reigned 41 years. 24 And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. 25 He restored the coast of Israel from the entering of Hamath unto the sea of the plain, according to the word of the Lord God of Israel, which he spake by the hand of his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, which was of Gath-hepher. 26 For the Lord saw the affliction of Israel, that it was very bitter, for there was not any shut up, nor any left, nor any helper for Israel. 27 And the Lord said not that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam the son of Joash. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, and all that he did, and his might, how he warred, and how he recovered Damascus and Hamath, which belonged to Judah, for Israel, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? 29 And Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son